when you hit the like button, you tell Google, show this to people doing Google searches for Florida State versus the ACC. Let's get into it because I think it's been very interesting watching this process play out, and we've talked about it ad nauseum on this show. I encourage you, again, maybe you don't know this, but all of our shows live on this channel forever. Everything we have ever said about the ACC and Florida State is right here in our archives. Feel free to go back and check it out because the news that we got yesterday, I think was pretty accurate to what we've been reporting for over a year now, that there is no easy path or direct path out of the ACC conference. And what have we heard about Florida State? Oh, Florida State's getting out. We've got the smoking gun. That ESPN agreement, that's the smoking gun. Well, it turns out it wasn't because the news we got is that the ACC and Florida State are continuing to negotiate a way to keep the ACC conference together. That's right. I said the ACC and Florida State, as we have told you, have been negotiating, and it looks like the outcome of this will be that the ACC remains intact, as we've told you on this channel that it would, because there is no clear avenue or path forward for Florida State and Clemson. Nobody cares about Clemson, but for Florida State and Clemson to win their lawsuit and exit the ACC. There is no clear path because the grant of rights is a document that was executed and agreed to by all of the members, not once, but twice. There was no smoking gun, very obviously, in the ACC's broadcast agreement with ESPN, which Florida State and their attorneys have access to, as we reported on this show. And as I've said, there is no possibility for Florida State to come up with $500 million to buy their way out of the ACC grant of rights. This was always the way that we were going, as we've told you on this show. What we heard yesterday, I don't think is shocking or surprising. Florida State wants a larger piece of the pie. But what are the details? And what have we told you about the way that money will be distributed in the ACC and just about every other conference going forward? Merit-based distribution. We have talked about that at length on this show, that if you go to a bowl game, you get more money than the school who didn't go to the bowl game. If you represent the conference in the NCAA tournament, you get more money than the schools who don't make the NCAA tournament. It is merit-based compensation. That's what Florida State and Clemson are now negotiating with the ACC to change the way that the payout system works in the ACC. And it's what we've always known was coming. Jake, is there any level of surprise for you in how this has so far played out?
No, not at all. I mean, I think exactly what you said is the exact situation. I mean, I just the crazy part about this whole thing is that, you know, we're sitting here weeks ago, months ago at this point, saying like, hey, like there's not a way out of the ACC. Like you signed the document, the grant of rights, not once but twice. Like you essentially, you know, locked yourself in that conference. And the idea that you were trying to get out and have been trying to get out, and the idea that you would have spent all this money on attorney fees and like you would have put this much effort forward to try to get out of this conference when the end of this conversation was so obvious is just baffling to me. I don't understand, you know, what Florida State officials and leadership thought they were going to get out of this situation. So no, this end is not surprising. If anything, it's expected and inevitable because, you know, at the end of the day for Florida State and Clemson in the ACC, like they're still a really good conference. I know that obviously this year on the football field hasn't been what, you know, most, you know, Florida State fans and Clemson fans probably are wanting and desiring. But just as a conference, the ACC is fine. They have a TV deal. They've got membership. They've got, you know, basically everything that you need to be successful and sustainable. And I guess I just look at this and I say, man, like you guys just wasted a ton of money over what exactly? because even if you did get out of the conference, going to another conference was never a slam dunk. It wasn't like it was just, auto bidding into the SEC, or like you were just, automatically going to get that invite into the Big Ten. Like that wasn't ever guaranteed. No conference ever came out and said, hey, well, if you get out of your conference, like you can come and be part of ours. That never happened. We've got clips of Greg Sankey saying, without saying that probably wouldn't have happened. So I don't know. There's not any surprise that this is the end, but the surprising part is that Florida State and Clemson chose to continue to just invest and invest and spend in something that, to me, always had this outcome. And frankly, I think going forward, the real question is, how does this impact, more Florida State than Clemson, but how does it impact these two's relationship with the conference?
I think that Florida State is not a popular member of this conference already. I think the fact that you have wasted tens of millions of dollars, not even of your own assets, but of the ACC's assets, does not help that cause. You are looking at a conference that is going to now, like every other power conference in the land, wind up paying out significant monies in NIL settlements and revenue sharing to players on top of tens of millions of dollars in legal fees for an outcome that we all knew. As you said, as we've said, this was the only eventuality. This was it. There's never been a path out.
And it's not like this is like a new realization. That's the thing. Like it would be different if like the realization just happened like a week ago, but that's not the case. I mean, how long have we been talking about this? Like months
a year
now? A year. Like, it's been a long time that this whole thing has been going on, and it maybe, really turned up last year when, they didn't get into the playoff, and, the Jordan Travis injury happens and all hell broke loose, down there. But I just can't believe that Florida State thought there would be a different outcome. And this part of it now makes me feel like the ESPN contract, nonsense was exactly what we said it was, which was a reach to get something rather than nothing.
But I feel like I go back to this, and I think we do this in sports, politics. We do this all the time. If you sign a document, if you sign a contract, and at some point you're unhappy with it, you can't just say, okay, I'm done. Sorry, I'm not going to execute. I'm not going to continue. And then go, we're out of here. And then go to court and be like, oh, there was fraud involved. There was no fraud involved. Do you really truly believe that a company the size and scope of Disney, ABC, and ESPN are going to put in writing illegality and fraud and risk their financial viability? They're truly, college football and NFL football is the lifeblood of ESPN.
Right.
Do you really think ESPN is going to put in writing malfeasance, fraud, illegalities into a contract with the ACC to risk their entire business? That was never the case. And again, as somebody who spent a bit of time at ESPN, there's nothing that they do willy-nilly. There's nothing that ESPN does where they're like, nobody's ever going to know. How will they know? Nobody will ever know.
Obviously not.
They don't do it was never possible. And all the Florida State fans that were here that said, oh, but Monty, no but Monty's. I can only tell you so many times, big business doesn't get to big business by committing frauds at every other turn, where you're just going to be able to file a lawsuit and all of a sudden all the dead bodies will appear right out in front of you and you'll get what you want.
Right.
It does not work that way. And the bigger question, I think this is a huge question. Did Florida State lose here? Oh, I don't think there's any doubt that Florida State lost here. And you know why I think Florida State lost here? Florida State lost here because I think Florida State thought they were going to end up in the SEC or the Big Ten. I think Florida State believed that they were going to make $50, $60, $100 million a year because, well, we're Florida State. And as it turns out, contract law doesn't care who you think you are. Contract law only cares what the contract says. And the contract says you're locked into a grant of rights until 2036, I think it is. You're locked into a grant of rights for a very long time. And as I always tell you, it's not up to the ACC. It's not up to Florida State. It's up to ESPN, because ESPN is the one cutting checks. And ESPN is the one making or breaking your football program. And as we're finding out now with Florida State and Clemson and the ACC, and hey, by extension, the Big 12 and the Pac-12, what ESPN wants, ESPN gets. And if ESPN wants to extend that grant of rights and sign their option, they'll do that. And my guess is they will do that, because there's no reason for ESPN not to extend the broadcast agreement with the ACC. Why would you pay more? Why would you opt out of it? Because I got news for you. Where is the ACC going to go? And again, I just ask, let's play the game, Florida State. You won the lawsuit. Where are you going to go? Do you think you're getting into the Big Ten? You're not. So what does that mean? Think about, that means you're still got to do business with ESPN. Because who's got the Big 12 contract? Which, again, I will state, as I've stated for months now, anybody that believes, and this is the other thing I would point out, where are all the Twitter trolls and I have sources guys who are like, oh, the ACC is melting down, Florida State's going to the Big 12. I heard it here. You heard it here first. What happened to all those guys? It was never a possibility. And again, I ask, what I've asked for 6 months, is Florida State really going to leave the ACC to go to the Big 12, take a pay cut, a big pay cut at the time, because now I think Brett Yormark in the commercial division has done yeoman's work. But you were going to really take a pay cut to go to the Big 12? No, you weren't. You were going to the SEC, or you weren't leaving the ACC. And guess what? The SEC apparently doesn't want you because you folded, Florida State. That's the reality of it. And I hope that the lesson learned in Tallahassee is stop Governor DeSantis from burning $1 million of taxpayer money because, Jordan Travis has an ankle boo-boo. So we're going to burn $1 million of taxpayer money to try and figure out how ESPN, again, the state of Florida suing ESPN, we want documents. Okay, great. Put what you want in one hand and take it in the other and tell me what you get first. Because you didn't get the documents you asked for. There is no smoking gun in the grant of rights. There was no smoking gun with the college football playoff. And you've lost not once, not twice, but now 3 times to ESPN. Stop fighting ESPN. You need them. They're not the guy you fight, and they're not the guy you sue, Florida State. And I don't know how you come to this point where you pay really good legal minds tens of millions of dollars. And I think it should be pointed out, I'm told that Florida State has spent over $100 million in legal fees trying to find a way out of the ACC. Now only to turn around and settle and stay in the ACC. And it is important to note, settlement talks are ongoing and they are not close to being done. That's according to Ross Dellinger. Mm-hmm. And as we told you, that motion to vacate, I think I even said this when you bailed on the show. I think I even said this on Friday. Why did Florida State file a motion to dismiss? It's a negotiating tool. That's all it is. It was to open up another conversation. Why do you think the ACC and Florida State and the ACC really has mediation clauses in all of their contracts, as does everybody else? Because it saves you money. You'd rather pay a mediator than a lawyer. So I'm fed up with, hey, I don't like that, I'm going to sue.
Well, I mean, think about, let's step back from just Florida State and this whole thing for a moment and look at college football in the big picture. I mean, how many times has this happened? I mean, so you've got Florida State and Clemson. You've obviously got Michigan in that whole situation where they wanted to go to court and then at the last second pulled out of the court date because they had nothing. We obviously had a lot of posturing when the Pac-12 situation went down, when that conference was melting down.
Yes.
And I think we just see it time and time again where and it is unique to each situation, but we have sort of a pattern forming here where, hey, I don't like it, so we're going to sue. And then when we get our ass kicked in court and in the argument, we're not going to sue anymore. And that's the hard part, because I feel like it's unnecessary to behave this way. Like, I understand that if you have a grievance about, hey, like, the distribution's unfair. Not everybody should be getting the same number. And we at
But
Florida State,
is that what it is?
I think that's not what it was originally, but I think that's Florida State's main issue, is
I,
that we didn't get into the college football playoff, so we're not making the money.
I think this is Florida State paying for this beautiful white picket fence. And let me tell you, they paint it regularly. They make sure all the nails are in there. They make sure they look down the property line and it's like, oh man, that fence is perfectly straight. But hey, look how green the grass is on the other side. They're making more money in the Big 12. They got a what TV contract? I think that's what this is. I think Florida State is standing constantly. They're that dude that's like, man, my fence is nice. My yard's really nice. I use turf builder. I feed it. But look how green their grass is. That's who Florida State is. I think Florida State, their biggest weakness is their FOMO, their fear of missing out.
Well, and they don't appreciate what they do have, because that's the other thing. Like, you look around conferences and the changing landscape, and being in the ACC is not the worst place to be. I mean, if you think about
Certainly
it,
not.
A brand like Florida State, typically, and I know this year again has been an absolute disaster, obviously, but
Seriously.
they've been, in the last several years, they've been in the college football playoff conversation. They've been, right in the middle of that thing, and I think that, if you're in the ACC, like let's not forget why you went to the ACC over the SEC back in the day. Well, the path to national championships is easier through the ACC.
So said Bobby Bowden,
which still to this day remains true. So what we're really talking about, ultimately, if we boil this thing all the way down, is Florida State just can't get out of their own way. And it's really a shame, because if you think about the great, Bobby Bowden Florida State teams, Florida State as a brand is a great brand. Like, even when Jimbo was there, they were really good. You had a lot of NFL talent on that roster. Like, Florida State is a school in a football program that, when it's good, it can be really good. And not every football program can say that. And so
I agree.
To me, it's a shame that we're in a time where the state of Florida is having to say, yeah, UCF's the best team in Florida right now. What? Like, how is that possible? So, and then you pile on the court stuff, and I just say, man, like, get out of your own way. Like, stop talking, stop suing, stop spending hundreds of millions of dollars on lawyers. Like, let's get back to, hey, like, how are we going to make money through tickets? How are we going to make money through the portal? Like, how can we do this and do that? Like, get back to thriving as a football program. Then let's talk about, trying to get into the SEC or the Big Ten when the grant of rights is over, or when, a Super League may happen down the line. Like, that's what the conversation should be.
Yeah, and I think it is unfortunate. You haven't been to the NCAA tournament since 2021, it looks like. I mean, I think that that's the lesson here, that you can't keep looking over your neighbor's fence, and you need to make sure that you're building programs that win. And I think Leonard Hamilton has done a good job, but that's a university that, one, you're in a powerhouse basketball league. Arguably, again, I say we can debate all you want, but one of the two best leagues in the country.
Yeah.
The ACC and the Big 12 are very close. And you have a guy in Leonard Hamilton who wins, but probably just not enough. And it's been a tough stretch over the last 3-4 years, post-COVID. And I think that it is one of those things where you've now got to look inward, and you've got to say, is Mike Norvell the right guy? Is Leonard Hamilton the right guy? Florida State has a rich tradition in baseball and stick and ball sports in general. Are we doing the right things? Stop suing people. Stop suing the conference. Stop pissing off your fellow ACC members.
Yeah.
That's really what this comes down to. And I think this story, and I know you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear it. Should Florida State fire Mike Norvell? Already.
Who's waiting in the wings?
Don't. See, why? Why? Damn you, Pac-Man Jones.
What's next for Florida State? Will Deion take the Florida State job? This is my opinion, people, so don't say I talked to Deion and leaked this out of here. But my opinion, he fit Florida State. My opinion, he would have picked Florida State over Colorado. But Florida State fucked that up. I truly think with Shedeur leaving and Travis Hunter, Deion is at Florida State next year.
Bro.
Do you believe?
No, I don't. No, I don't. And again, this is why I said maybe it was yesterday, Deion Sanders isn't going to Florida. Whatever day that was, we talked about this.
Oh, no.
Deion's not going to Florida. That's a Seminole. But are you telling me right now, even knowing that Deion has seminal fluid in his body, are you nothing? Okay. Are you telling me that you're already going to fire Mike Norvell, who's coming off of an undefeated ACC run, who is 31-20 as a head coach in Tallahassee? You'd fire him after one bad season, and this has been a really bad start. But if he finishes under 500, certainly not going to the playoff.
Okay,
you're telling me that you would fire him.
There's two ways to look at that record. Okay, he's 31-20 in his time, right? But he has more losing seasons now than winning seasons. So,
if this year stays on course,
yeah, you're 0-3 though. This is a losing season. You're not like. How my point about Florida State and why I call it a losing season is
DJU is your quarterback.
Yeah, and you just have no way to get back. There's no and I don't even mean from playoff purposes. I just mean how are you now gonna rip off 8 wins in a row, 7 wins in a row?
Come on.
You're not doing that.
You can't tell me that Deion Sanders is already leaving Colorado. I agree, it's a different way of life. This will be his last year coaching Shedeur, potentially. I don't know if he goes to the NFL. I doubt it. But this would be his last year coaching Shedeur.
Mm-hmm.
This will be Shedeur's first year without Deion Sanders. His dad is his coach. It's going to be a different way of life.
Yeah, well, and losing Travis Hunter, too, is no small thing.
That's a big deal.
Yeah.
You're more able to recruit at Florida State. So are you telling me, I could see it down the road. But doesn't he have to win something before he goes to Florida State?
Yeah, I think, if you're Florida State, to fire Mike Norvell, somebody who had you positioned to take a run at a national championship last year before the injury, to then have him have just such a drastic fall off here this year, I would be asking the same question. You have to, as an athletic director and as a president, ask, hey, why is it that we were 13-1 last year, but now this year we're just terrible? What happened? And obviously that conversation is going to play out. Now we all know what happened, right? It's pretty clear.
Yeah.
But non-football people, not people who don't necessarily academia, people who lead colleges and stuff, who maybe aren't as plugged in, are going to look at this and say, yeah, what's going on here? There's way too much inconsistency. Now the problem is, if I'm Florida State, I'm not going to fire Mike Norvell after one bad year, after you just went 13-1 in today's landscape, because you've got the transfer portal. This is Florida State. Hey, Mike, instead of trying to turn this year around and go 7-0 to end your year here, let's start talking about next year. Let's start recruiting. Let's start sending your boys out to go and get talent. That's what Mike Norvell should be doing right now. I understand that it's the middle of the season, but he's fully invested in winning ball games, but you got to be real about it, in my opinion. And this is what I would say to Deion, too. Deion's in a little bit different of a situation because nobody expects them to win anything. But if you're Deion Sanders, after Shedeur and Travis leave, now we get to see who you really are, because you've never been a college football coach without Shedeur. So who are you when you have a garbage quarterback and you have to win on defense? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think, obviously, he's coming off of the best defensive performance his team's ever had. I mean, that they dominated Colorado State.
Yeah.
I mean, there's no doubt about that.
With, he wouldn't shake dude's hand after the game. I wouldn't have shook dude's
the
hand
guy
either, dude.
Wholly disrespected Shedeur. I wouldn't have shook his hand either. He did the too short thing on Travis Hunter. He talked about they can't win this game on social media. They're in for a surprise.
Like, move along.
That and I would also point out that's arguably your most hated rival.
Yeah.
And I think that yeah. Anyway, the point is they want the Deion Carnival in Florida State, in Tallahassee. I don't think they want it right now.
Well, and I agree with people saying, hey, 6-9 as a coach so far at the Power 5 level. I agree with that. Those are numbers. Those are stats. They're undisputed. Now,
but he's also turning around a program.
I agree. That's what I was going to say. You also, if you're going to be the Mr. Hayes 6-9 at the Power 5 level, you also have to say, hey, the first year was a pretty damn good year, all things considered. I mean, with what he had to work with, like, that's a pretty good performance. And now moving forward, like, I think they are in a tough spot right now. They are good enough to beat the group of 5 level teams.
Oh, I think they're better than that.
They are, well, I think they got to prove they're better than that. You don't go,
you can't, their schedule.
Dude, you can't go to Nebraska and get your ass beat like that and then say that you're better
than
that.
I don't think they're better than Nebraska. I think, and I know, again, here's one of the, hey, Monty, you're an idiot. What did I tell you about Nebraska? I told you Matt Rule turns programs around quickly.
Right.
And you bring in a guy, again, a Shedeur Sanders, you bring in a Raiola.
Mr. I'm going to impersonate Patrick Mahomes. Yeah.
You bring in a guy like that, and you're a much better team, and they're 3-0. Now, obviously, they haven't really – Colorado is by far their best opponent, but that doesn't matter. You're still 3-0, and Raiola looks really good. And I think when you look at Colorado's also 1-1 and could, or 2-1, and could easily be 1-2. That Colorado State game, after getting thumped by Nebraska, 28-10 on the road, that would have been a laydown game. But Deion, and I know we don't like talking about Deion Sanders in a positive light. That's not something we do in this country. But you might want to remember that Deion Sanders did exactly what he said he was going to do. He has clearly brought in a lot of talent on that defense, and they are better. He has developed Travis Hunter into, I think, the best college football player in the country. I think Shedeur Sanders is going to be a top 5 draft pick. I think they're both going to go top 5.
Projected number 2 right now.
He's developing talent.
Yeah.
He's getting talent and developing talent. The offensive line has got to be better. Seton, by the way, is graded out very well.
Mm-hmm.
His PFF grade is actually really good. The offensive line's got to be better. It's his one weakness. He has shored up that defense. And I think when you look at their schedule coming up, he needs to beat Baylor.
Yeah,
but that game's at Folsom. He needs to beat Baylor.
Here's the problem. I don't have a high confidence level they will beat Baylor.
Oh, I think that Baylor's offense is not great. And I think at home, I think it's a nighttime game at home. I think that's going to be a very difficult game for Baylor to go on the road and win. They clearly, and I know we have a lot of Texans on the show. I think they clearly ran out of gas in the second half against Utah. I think we saw that.
Yeah, I mean, I have no problem saying I think Utah broke that team before the half.
And I think the secondary at Colorado is actually really good.
Yeah.
And that's what gave Baylor fits.
Yeah.
Is that I think this is a very good matchup. And if he goes to 3-1, heading to the bounce house to end September.
Yeah, I mean, if you beat Baylor, then that makes me feel a little bit better about what you can do against Power 4 opposition. I just think that there's been, again, I'm not saying I expected them to beat Nebraska at Nebraska. I'm not saying that.
Sure.
What I'm saying is that I expected you to be competitive, and you weren't. You weren't even close to competitive in that game. And that's the hard part.
Aren't you selling Nebraska short?
I don't think I am. I think that there's a difference when you go on the road and the other team is just that much better than you versus, hey, you just weren't, like, your offensive line was beyond bad in that game. Like Like, I'm not even saying it was like, I know Shador throws the pick six in that game, but look at why he was in that position and look at why he made that throw. Or
6
felt
sacks.
like, he got his ass beat in that game. And that's the hard part is that I like the Baylor game. Okay. It's at home. Okay. That's a different conversation than going down to Waco. I get that. That's different. But the problem is that I need to see that offensive line against a Power 4 team, be it all Baylor. You need to show me that you can give Shador even 3 seconds to make a decision. Because if you can give him 3 seconds, his ability to escape will give him the 4th second. He can run away from you. So
yeah, I think the numbers in that game are not nearly as bad as you probably remember. Some of the, I mean, they were 4 of 14 on 4th down. On 3rd down, rather. That's terrible. They got out yarded pretty significantly, 334 to 260. So 75 more yards. Like, those are the numbers that stand out. But Nebraska had more penalties. I think obviously the interception for the pick six changes that game significantly.
Right.
If it is 21-10, that's a very different looking game. But my point is, I think Deion Sanders is actually doing a good job at Colorado.
Yeah,
and I know
people won't say that. That's the hard part.
I know people won't say that. And I think that the noise around Deion is not what people want. Like this Feinbaum thing yesterday, where Deion Sanders said it's unfair to continue to go at kids and say, well, how much money are you making? Because now, and I agree with Prime on this, Deion Sanders is essentially saying it's wrong to say to a kid, well, your NIL money is too much based on your production. It's none of your business. They're not, in my opinion, this is one of the downsides of NIL.
Well, I think
you now have financial expectations on 17, 18, 19-year-old kids.
But that's what you don't get to have it both ways as a player. I disagree.
I'm not
like,
but am I saying it's wrong? No, I'm not saying it's wrong. I think it's one of the downsides of NIL. And I think the media being aggressive in at Colorado, I think the hyperbole and the hype brings some of this on.
Totally agree.
But when you have local reporters, and this is at the heart of one of the local fights that Deion has, you have reporters, saying to Shador, well, how much are you making? And trying to make this equity argument on-field performance. And I just think you should not be doing that.
Yeah, I think that Deion and Shador specifically are not in a position to say to the media, hey, you can't ask me about my money when you're out here with Rolls Royces and Lambos and you're doing the whole watch celebration. Like, I don't even mind that they show
and you're
off
filing
that way.
You're filing Shiloh, I think it was, filed bankruptcy.
Right. So there's a reason to ask these dudes specifically.
But it's a bit much at Colorado, I think. And Feinbaum then goes on his show yesterday and they run the clip all over SportsCenter and ESPN about how that's not happening and nobody in the media is asking. Feinbaum's a cartoon character.
Yeah.
Media members are asking, and I understand why. It's a story you love talking about in college towns.
Right.
Thankfully, here in Salt Lake City, we don't have that because we don't have huge NIL deals. But when you're Shador Sanders, and I agree with you, you're driving a Lambo and you're blinged out and people are going to ask. I don't think they should be asking. I understand why they do.
Being a high-profile player. I mean,
it's part of being rich in this country.
Yeah, I mean, we see this at the professional level all the time. The only difference is we know what money you're making.
I agree.
We know that.
I agree.
We know that. Daniel Jones should not have gotten that contract. We know that Jordan Love is not a $55 million a year player.
Why don't we ask this about football coaches?
Well,
why, when we're talking about Mike Norvell, who's got an 85% equity buyout, which means his buyout at Florida, I don't know how many people give a rat's ass about this, but his buyout at Florida State is 85% of his remaining base. which I think after this season will be $60 million. So
He's not going anywhere.
Why don't? No, I think he absolutely would. The money, dude. They've got so much. It's Florida with Billy Napier. The collective already says, "Hey, we've got the money. If you want to fire Billy Napier today, go for it. We'll cut you a check."
Yeah,
but nobody talks about that with the coach. What? Nobody. I mean, we made the conversation, the argument about, you know, Jimbo. I hate to even say his name, but
yeah.
Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M.
Well, think about how the Bill Belichick stuff went down at the end of his time in New England, right? I mean, everyone for years, because his contract details are always private, but for years people speculated about what's this guy getting paid, you know? And at the end there, they were bad, and so people are like, "What are you paying this guy for them to be bad?" Like, I think, you know, I don't disagree that you know, this conversation about NIL and what a kid's making is not for every kid to be asked.
No,
but I think that. And again, I want to be really clear on where I'm at with Colorado and Prime and Shador. Like, I appreciate the way they do this. I appreciate that Deion Sanders does it a little bit differently and isn't just giving us like the typical coach speak and the basically the same thing we see from literally every coach. I appreciate that he's doing it his way and he's unapologetic about it. That, like, our country is founded on that type of behavior. And I think the only problem they have is that they're not winning. That's the problem. If they think about how different Colorado would be viewed if they were winning. We don't give a damn about super speeders at Georgia.
But are they winning?
No.
Yes, they are.
Not at a high enough level.
On scale.
Yeah, but nobody gives a damn about scale. I agree, but nobody cares. That's the problem.
But okay. That right there is the problem. Yeah, I agree with that.
Nobody cares.
It's year 1 and a quarter.
Like with Matt Rule, I think a lot of people are happy to say, hey, Matt Rule took over a terrible Nebraska program and now has them going in the right direction.
What happens if his schedule is incredibly easy at Nebraska?
Yeah.
But what happens if he loses at Ohio State, which he's gonna, at USC, at Iowa? I mean, their schedule's cake. Illinois, at Purdue, Rutgers. Did you guys see what's going on at Rutgers? The athletic director and the president. At Indiana, who is turning out not to be a cupcake. At Ohio State, UCLA, at USC, Wisconsin, and at Iowa. That's a cakewalk. If that's not a one-loss schedule, are we talking about how much NIL money Rayola's making? If that's not a one-loss schedule, are we sure that Matt Rule's the right guy? That's what we're doing to Colorado.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a double standard, and it needs to be pointed out.
And I think a lot of it is self-inflicted.
Yeah.
All right, let's get your comments in here on the Monty Show.
Hey, Monty.
You guys, thanks for being here. We appreciate it. And we were looking at our viewership numbers yesterday. Our viewership is unbelievably good. And I want to shout out the state of Florida. I want to shout out the state of Texas. I want to shout out the state of California. Obviously, I want to shout out the state of Utah, our number one by far. Thank you, Salt Lake City and Salt Lake County. Appreciate you guys. But top to bottom, the state of Utah, St. George, hello, Cedar City. How about Cedar City?
Hey, Cedar City.
You need to get out of that town when it snows because it's not
it's
good.
So gnarly there.
Love the state of Utah. Hello, Arizona. Arizona, I think, is in the top 5 once again in viewership on the show. Thank you for that. But Utah, California, Texas, Nevada. Hello, Las Vegas.